Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about something which my sexless marriage people obviously does not apply to you, but not everybody that listens to me, thankfully, is in a sexless marriage. A lot of people are just trying, to work on their relationship in general, right? And one thing that I've noticed, as we will discuss, is sometimes having sex too frequently is counterproductive. And I will get into what I mean by that right as soon as I tell you to subscribe. Most recent subscriber episode was on love addiction and all the ins and outs of that. All right. And of course, remember, y'all should join my Facebook group. It's $4.99 a month, the blue subscribe button on my page. And it's where, a lot of my thoughts come from when I'm addressing. Sometimes I specifically address people's questions and I engage in their threads, etc. But this one does not come from the group. But anyway, this is something else from practice. So sometimes people start to have sex so much that the lower libido partner does not ever want it. So it isn't as though the sex is not enjoyable, but it's like on this regular routine, like let's say like every other day, right? And yes, there's people having sex every other day. The younger couples have sex a lot, They have sex more than the older couples, and even some of the older couples, are having sex that frequently. Or let's say it's 3 times a week, so it's not exactly every other day, but close. Or it's even twice a week, right? When you look at the research shows that once a week is associated with, less than once a week rather, is associated with an unhappy marriage. And so it really only starts to be associated with a happy marriage at once a week. Now, I've seen in practice that the happier couples have sex more often than that, and I've even said, if you're trying to try something new, why don't you try to have sex every day for a little while, right? And see what that does with the idea of just practice for people who haven't been doing anything like that, getting comfortable with each other. But sometimes people do take this to an extreme. And there are more women than you would realize that tell me that we have sex every day and I am not happy with him ever. And he just takes it for granted and I don't really enjoy the sex. And I'm doing it, and this is a lot of women raised in purity culture feel like this too. I'm doing it so that he doesn't masturbate or he doesn't say that he's sexually frustrated. So basically, like the guy has them thinking, and he's not no nefarious thing, he thinks too that like he has to get off every day because that's just what he always did, was masturbate every day. And so if he doesn't, then he's going to want to. And so basically it's almost, and I'll get to this in a second, it's no big deal for her. So then let's just have sex every night, right? Or every morning. Well, I'll tell you, it swiftly becomes no big deal for her if you do it that frequently, unless, of course, it's honeymoon stage. Honeymoon stage, her hormones are rampant. She's drunk. She's, basically, it's my analogy with dancing on the bar when you're drunk versus if the guy asked you to dance on the bar when you were sober the next morning, right? So that's how it feels to be in honeymoon stage and out of honeymoon stage. And this is 1.5 to 3 years. And you can listen to my honeymoon stage podcast about it, Just search the term honeymoon stage. But the point is that after the honeymoon stage, there are women who are still trying to do it every day, every other day, because the guy says that's the only way that he won't masturbate or he really wants to. And there are very few women after the honeymoon stage whose refractory period, because women have that too. I mean, it's not the same. So, it is the same sort of thing. Like you can't have an orgasm after you've had so many orgasms or whatever, the same as a man. But it's like it's like a physical one. Like they don't start to crave sex or want sex for let's say a week. And so if they're doing it every day, then they are basically just laying there because there's almost and possibly having an orgasm, which doesn't always mean that they like sex. Remember that, just like it doesn't for guys. Like you could be having sex with a woman who's just laying there. And remember, young men mind this a lot less than older men. So young men don't really honestly notice a lot of the time if she's just laying there because that's been their whole experience with other girlfriends and whatever. And they come pretty quick anyway. So, no harm, no foul. She's really hot. And so they roll on top of her and then they roll off of her. And that isn't good sex. So there are many women who are having frequent bad sex that they can't possibly want because it's like they're being fed like veal, like they're being like force-fed sex, like not forcibly. I'm not saying, God forbid, it's not non-consensual. And I talk a lot about what coercion is and isn't. I have a whole podcast on that. I'm not talking about anything coercive. I'm talking about when the couple has decided basically like, oh, he wants to get off every day, so I guess that's what we'll do. I don't mind. But then frequently the woman has no idea, and I have a podcast on this, about her full sexual potential, because it's like never waiting till you're hungry to eat. It's like constantly snacking all the time. And honestly, the guy doesn't get really better at sex because she's never wanting sex. So she's just kind of like laying there, and at the end she takes out her vibrator, or he gets her off himself, and so she has her orgasm and he has his orgasm, and it seems like it's good, except she isn't really into it, like at all. And when her natural, and when her hormones change so that it starts to feel kind of like painful or repellent to her, and that doesn't just have to be menopause where it starts to feel painful, like even in perimenopause or as you age or at different stages of your menstrual cycle in different parts, as you get older, it starts to feel kind of worse to have sex when you're not in the mood. I talk a lot about responsive desire, and yes, responsive desire can kick in with foreplay. And I have a whole podcast on responsive desire. If you are touched, then that's how many women get aroused. But don't forget that all the foreplay in the world can't get you aroused sometimes. So if it's like in the second half of your cycle and you're really not feeling it, and you're trying to kiss and you're trying to do foreplay, you can't get aroused. But if you're in a marriage where then you're still expected to have sex every day, you start to dissociate your arousal with sex. Like it has nothing to do with each other, because like half the month you're kind of not into it. And honestly, you're kind of never into it, as I'm saying, because it's just so constant that you're kind of never really into it. Like the days of ovulation, it feels better, but there's no mental wanting it piece because it's happening too frequently. It would be as though for a man, the analogy would be you're expected to go on a romantic date night every single night or every other night. You're not going to be into it. You're not going to feel romantic. You're not going to try to like ask fun questions. It's just going to turn into, this is what we do for dinner, is we go to fancy restaurants. And then eventually that turns into, why the fuck are we wasting money doing this? That's what it would turn into, right? And when people do go out to eat all the time, that is what it turns into. And then frequently they say, why are our kids acting so spoiled about going out to eat? Whenever people say that, I say, oh, how often do you go? And they're like a couple times a week at least. I'm like, well, that's where they eat dinner, So this is not a treat. How's it a treat? So frequently it's interesting, people who didn't ever get to eat out as kids will like eat out all the time with their kids. Then they think their kids are spoiled because they don't appreciate the restaurant. Appreciate the restaurant? They're at the damn restaurant all the time. So what the hell? Half the time they want to be home. They don't even want to go to the restaurant because it's, it's out of the house and they want to be able to do their thing and it's a whole big deal and they have to drive and whatever. So it's like that, but for sex. If she's having sex every day, every other day, she never gets to where she really, really thinks about it, yearns for it, wants it. And I have a lot of podcasts on female arousal. What does it look like? Like, that's a good one. Like, a lot of guys don't even know. Because remember, these encounters, they're not an hour long, which many women need to get fully aroused. Because who the hell can do 7 hours a week of sex? It's not your only job, right? You have children, etc. So it turns into like 10 minutes a day, or 15 minutes every other day. And, it's like she never kind of gets into she never gets into the feeling of desiring it because it's always there. And so frequently, or rather it's not uncommon. I wouldn't say it's like, a large percent, but I have repeatedly seen a situation arise in couples counseling where they went from every day or every other day to basically not having sex at all because she got fed up. And she was like, I don't like this. I've never really liked it. And I've just been doing it basically for the past X amount of years. X always starts after honeymoon stage ends because this was kind of what he said he needed, but I haven't liked it. Why have I been doing this? So it turns into kind of this emotional or mental issue where she's like, why the hell have I been doing all this all the time, especially as she gets older? And the guy is blindsided. He's like, I thought you like it. Like, I make sure you have an orgasm, or sometimes you tell me you can and you say you're fine with that. And so, that's what we do. And it's not like guys are doing this to be nefarious or they're having any kind of negative intention. They feel like they're living the dream for a little while. Frequently when they come into therapy, I'll be like, oh, how long is foreplay? And they're like, oh, so that's like what? I mean, I go down on her every time. So that's how we start. So I make sure they're very proud of themselves. And then, of course, I have my whole podcast on oral sex and what you don't know. And what you don't know is it's not foreplay, right? So the woman is sitting there kind of waiting until that's over for the couple minutes of sex so she can go to sleep. And this isn't good sex for her, right? So this isn't good sex for her. She's not yearning. There's no build up. So what I tell people instead, figure out your erotic blueprints, take the quiz and the post that I have about it, the podcast. I've done a podcast about it. There's 5 erotic blueprints. At least it could give you a way to start talking about what, each of you likes in bed. Frequently the woman is getting barely any foreplay at all, a few minutes, and it's just sex has become like taking out the trash for her. And guys don't realize that that's not a her problem. That's a problem of how sex is in the couple. And one variable is frequently that it's just too much. It's like snacking all day. You're not going to want dinner, but dinner would have been more fulfilling, or my date night analogy. You're not going to want to go to date night all the time. It's not going to be special if you go all the time. Or anything is like that. If you do it more than you want to by that much, then it's not anything really. And so this doesn't mean that you shouldn't have sex at all. Obviously, my entire, career, I'm telling you to have sex in your marriage. But if you are one of these couples where you got into this daily routine and the woman kind of seems like she's not really into it, and she makes comments or she kind of never initiates it, ever. Like, why would she never initiate it? Well, Occam's razor would suggest because she doesn't want it. If you're having sex every day, she's got a lot of time to initiate. But if she never does, maybe it's because it's not so great, right? So if it's not so great, then one thing to think about is, are we just having like shitty sex too frequently instead of building up for longer sex that is better and that we each yearn for? So maybe if we didn't do it every other day, maybe if we did it, twice a week, right? Then it could be better sex. That's the thing. Or maybe we would do it like every day during ovulation, but then we wouldn't make sure to have sex every single day of the week before her period, because God forbid we're going to have to stop during her period, and which she hates. And she hates that sex because her body feels different. She feels bloated. She feels her breasts are sore. And, it's a problem that a lot of women do not share this stuff with their husband. They don't say basically in the entire week leading up to my period, I'm basically repulsed by you. And it's not you, it's me. My hormones are changed. But us having sex during that time is leading up to a lot of bad memories for me. And sometimes, of course, women don't realize that's happening at all. They're just kind of used to, the women who wouldn't say that are used to being so passive in their lives and have been trained to be so approval seeking that they're like not even aware of how they are. Like there's this woman, you should follow her, Haley McGee. She's a people pleaser specialist on Instagram. And she did a little video I thought was funny about when your therapist tells you as a people pleaser to just do what you want for one day, just do what you want all day. Oh, wow. That sounds great. And then it shows her at like 8 a.m., 12 p.m., 6 p.m. She's just sitting there. She hasn't figured it out yet what she wants to do. So a lot of women who get into these situations are that. They are people pleasers. They kind of don't even know what they want. They just go along with what somebody tells them they should want, right? And so they can't even verbalize because they can't even articulate to themselves that this is just too much shitty sex, And because it feels so threatening and risky to criticize him or to even think about what they want. They don't even have a frame to think about what they want. It's like one of these dystopian novels I talk about all the time. Like in The Giver, like did somebody know? Did they know that they wanted to have memories and color? No, because they didn't have that. So they don't know. So a people pleaser doesn't know like that this is like even like a possibility that other people just have sex like when they have desire, because they've never, ever had that. And I'm not talking about spontaneous desire. Remember, I'm talking about responsive desire. Responsive desire is not going to kick in for the average woman every single day. It's just not, unless she's super young or in the honeymoon stage. So it's not like if you touch her just right every single day of her life, then you could have great sex, because often she needs more time than that. She needs more time since the last encounter, than the next morning, right? So for the couples that do have this issue, and believe me, there are those couples because I see them. And you can think about this. You could think, how can we have more quality sex than quantity? And a lot of times the guys who are doing this everyday thing are the late bloomers that are very kind of obsessive and don't like to skip days and get kind of antsy and fiending during her period even, and that isn't just like a normal guy thing, that's an anxiety thing. That's an anxiety. And if that's you, then that's a precedent setting anxiety. Guys that get upset about setting the wrong precedent, and the same guys that are like, oh, if I keep running every single day of my life, then I'll still be running a 10-minute mile when I'm 75. No, you won't, And unless you're like the two guys in the world that do that. So the point is that it takes two to get into this dynamic. It's usually a woman who's a people pleaser and a guy who's an anxious late bloomer. And if that's your situation, then you guys need to probably do a lot more research into what good sex is, including all my stuff on foreplay, erotic blueprints, female arousal, oral sex, etc. And, the woman needs to think about what she really wants. What does she really find arousing? What is when does responsive desire kick in and when does it not? And if it doesn't, remember this, that responsive desire doesn't always kick in, and you're always allowed to say no, that you don't want to have sex. You're always allowed to say that. So even if it's right before sex, if you're feeling nothing, if your body is numb and you're not responding at all, of course you would say no. And this would be obvious to a woman who isn't raised as a people pleaser to be super approval seeking, and not raised, of course, in some sort of purity culture thing where you're supposed to please the man or whatever. Of course you could say no, you're not in the mood. So if you're kissing and nothing's happening for you at all, well, and I'm not talking about a situation where nothing ever happens, because then you got to get to a sex therapist, a therapist in general. There's probably more stuff going on, unless of course you're like nursing or you're grieving or you're ill or something, but if sexual desire never kicks on, then that's like a you problem. Not in a bad way. I'm saying that is a problem you should interact with and deal with and confront head on. But I'm talking about the situation where you respond well sexually and responsive desire does kick on, but it's just like it doesn't every single time, and the times are too much, and it's just getting to be a lot. And so in that situation, then you would need to have a conversation about that, because you're never supposed to be having sex that you have tried to get into and you can't. If you're trying and you just can't, then you would stop. And people would know that who are more assertive. And so that's why I'm saying it for the people who aren't. You can, of course. You're making out, you're touching, and you're exhausted and you feel absolutely nothing and you're thinking, when will this shit be over? Then you stop. Of course, you should try to get in the mood. It would be the same as if you're playing a game with your kid and you just had a blinding headache in the middle of it, right? So you're playing fucking Chutes and Ladders and, you just started and you get a blinding headache. There are some women that are raised that they would never stop the game. They would just sit there and power through it in horrible pain, probably scream at the kid way more because they are in pain. And then they're like not allowed to kind of opt out of like an obligation. And there's some women who would say, I'm sorry, sweetheart, I am in pain right now. We're going to have to play this later. And that would be the equivalent of what you do when you've tried foreplay and you've tried kissing and it doesn't work. It doesn't always have to work. It doesn't always work. We want responsive desire. There is desire in responsive desire. There is a desire part. What responsive desire means is that you get in the mood when you are touched versus before being touched, as you did when you were younger / in the honeymoon stage with spontaneous arousal. It does not mean you need to pretend to have desire as a response to a husband who wants to have sex. That's never what it means, you know, and I've talked a lot about this and about coercion, what it is and what it isn't. And of course, it's not coercive for your husband to try to have sex every day. What would be coercive is if he guilt trips you or cannot deal or sulks. I have one big podcast about sulking when you don't get laid, is some analogy about acting bad, because it's bad. Okay, well, I hope you guys like this. I hope you got a lot out of this. It was a little bit longer than usual, I think, and I will talk to you all soon. And again, if you have issues with this or anything else, you can always reach out to me or my practice, Best Life Behavioral Health. We have a sex coach. We have couples therapists. We have individual therapists. We have individual coaches. I mean, we got everything. All right, talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys.